I'm John Rodgers from Cuyahoga Falls, and we're going to go north to Alaska. And the reason for calling it north to Alaska, we're going to see a bit of Canada on the way. This trip is mostly about a 1986 trip, with a few portions about a 1977 trip. On this, we went up to Toronto and caught the train all the way across Canada. What you're looking at is Georgian Bay, part of Lake Erie. And I know it sounds exciting to say, well, we saw Georgian Bay and so forth, but mostly you saw trees as you were going through here. You did not see too much from the train until you got out onto the Great Plains where the trees were not. We took 3 different trains and slept in 3 different trains for 3 nights, 3,300 miles all the way across to Prince Rupert. We have reached over in the Saskatchewan area and over into the edge of Alberta, and this is rapeseed. This is the source of canola oil, one of the best of the cooking oils. And now we are in the Canadian Rockies, and this mountain up in here that is so light, it's snow-covered quite often, and it's named for Edith Cavell. She was a nurse, and she was executed by the Germans as a spy in World War I. But that beautiful mountain has been named in her honor. And we're in Jasper right at the moment. Now, the last part of this, the third of the routes, is called the Skeena route, and you play tag with the Skeena River after you go through this part of the Canadian Rockies. And this is the most beautiful of the 3 parts that we went through. Really gorgeous country. And tucked away behind or under some of that snow there is a small glacier. Won't amount to much in your estimation after you see some of the great tidewater glaciers of Alaska. This is the last picture that I took of Canada as we were moving on the Alaska Ferry from Prince Rupert up to Ketchikan. This is the last picture in Canada. So we'll stop there, and I want to go to the end of the trip now to where we were getting from Ketchikan back down to Prince Rupert to take the train across. It was Transprovincial Flight 602, and the travel agent told me that she could not find out any more information. Everything was set. Well, it turns out it's a bush pilot, and that's what we were flying in. And my wife is standing right here, and this is the pilot with some of our luggage, and we have our own customs officer, Canadian customs officer, came out to check the 2 of us into Canada at Prince Rupert. A terrific way to end an Alaskan vacation, about a 90-mile flight down from Ketchikan to Prince Rupert, and no more than about 2,200 feet in elevation the whole way. Now, long before the Iron Curtain was dismantled, so to speak, I always like to contrast this picture with the Berlin Wall or the Iron Curtain. Straight on behind the marker, on into the sky behind there is a tiny little path cut. And on the right-hand side is the Yukon Territory of Canada. On the left-hand side is Alaska. And that's all. No wall, no nothing. I have a little essay to open the part about Alaska, and I call this The Great Land. I thrust my mighty mountains high into the sky, right up into the clouds. I spread rivers of ice over their backs and break down those same mighty mountains. And then in due time I melt those ancient ice masses and carpet my valleys with small plants, many shrubs, and finally, trees. Into these new areas I send animals, from my famous mosquito to my mighty grizzly bear. And into the deep fiords and sounds I send more animals, from the small fishes to the great whales. Volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis are all a part of me. My name is Alaska. I am the great land. American bald eagles, humpback whales, wolves, caribou, and these are caribou, moose, seals, all of these are my children. Deep water fiords, rivers, valleys, and the highest mountains on the North American continent are part of me. Forests, tundra, and many other varied plant groups cover my vast terrain. Many square miles of my rugged surface are being made even more rugged by the action of glaciers, rivers of ice thousands of feet thick. But in time, that ruggedness will be softened by the growth of varied plant life. Many people from the lower 48 are amazed to find that many places in my great land are accessible only by air or water, unless one is really good at overland travel of the most rugged kind. Even man's capital, Juneau, and that's what you're looking at, must be reached by plane or boat, and many times a plane is a float plane. I am high and wide, but my winter darkness and my climate discourage permanent people. 17 of the highest 20 mountains in your United States lie within my boundaries. Many are amazed that I am over double the size of Texas. In fact, I am 1/5 the size of the other 49 states combined. The distance span between my southernmost city, Ketchikan, and my northernmost, Barra, is about the same as that between Florida and Minnesota. I span a range of environments that include both rainforests, which you're looking at, and tundra. My elevations range from sea level to almost 4 miles above sea level. And with all that height and space, my population puts an average of only one person in each 1.3 square miles. Indeed, if you took the county that I am from, Summit County in Ohio, and you populated it at the same density as Alaska, we'd only need 300 people. That's a glacier coming down between the mountains there. Riches, glittering gold or black oil, affect people in strange ways. Therefore, it is not too surprising to learn that my people, my native ones, and those from the lower 48 have problems. Ways have changed too fast. Money has come very fast through something like this pipeline going from Prudhoe Bay down to Valdez with the oil. Ancient ties have been cut too quickly. And remember that I have long hours of winter darkness to match the summer sunlight that you see. And that darkness can be depressing. Drugs and alcohol do little to foster a love of my land. Life in my southeast section, some call it the Panhandle, involves water and the sky. Boats and planes must be as much a part of your life as fish and the forest. But to those who explore me in this area, the rewards are rich. To round the curve, slide by ice floes and icebergs, and meet face to face one of my tidewater glaciers is to experience a high level of encounter with an eternal process. Seals will slip off ice floes as you approach, and the glacier will calve icebergs before your eyes. A little note in here, some of my seal pictures I was having trouble with a lens, and so they're a little dark. It didn't open up properly. Remember that that mile-wide, 200-foot wall of ice also goes down many feet, and it is grinding the rock as it moves forward. And when you're back out in the Sound and watch one of my humpback whales display a mighty fluke, that's his tail, remember that a 30 to 35 ton living mammal has just bid you a temporary farewell. Life on my tundra is a harsh life. The growing season is extremely short, and permafrost is often so close to the surface that a 100-year-old black spruce may be only a few feet tall. But caribou, Dall sheep, Arctic ground squirrels, grizzly bear, and other hardy species seem to thrive on the harsh life. You may even see an occasional wolf as you explore the area which man calls Denali National Park. Down along my Alaska mountain chain, volcanic cones await their turn to erupt. Days are years in the future, and that day does eventually come. My island volcano, Mount Augustine, the one you see off in the distance, erupted in 1986, and that was the year that we visited last. Earthquakes and tsunamis. Now, tsunamis are those giant waves. You'll hear them called tidal waves, but they have nothing at all to do with tides. They're earthquake spawned or volcano spawned, usually earthquakes. They continue to occur along my coastal zone. That area of me is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Sometimes these mighty forces of nature permanently change the ground level by many feet and send waves of water hundreds of feet high dashing into the shore. Many times a town is demolished, and rebuilding, if it starts, may be many miles from the previous site. And this little town of Portage was not rebuilt. The land out here in the 1964 Good Friday earthquake dropped about 12 feet. By geological standards, I am young, and I am situated where natural events of the earth continue to happen, and thus I am exciting. Many say that I am also very beautiful. But civilization has moved my way and is rapidly spreading out along the roads often far from towns. But if you like your gems still in the rough, hasten your steps and come to my great land. I won't always wrap you in the curtain of an aurora borealis, but if you'll get a bit away from my beaten tracks, you'll experience some of my basic processes, such as these examples. The tremendous power of a glacier to reshape the land, the battling of a salmon to reach the spawning grounds and the stream of its birth, and the predator-prey relationship in the eagle-fish drama. Those eagles are a little difficult to photograph. Hopefully you can see two up in that tree. And in you, perhaps, we find a warm glow that means that in some small ways you have rekindled a love for Mother Nature and have reestablished a tie with her. When you feel that tie loosening, return to my great land. I'll be changed, but I'll be here, ready once again to unfold my beauty and my drama and to refill your cup to overflowing. Now we're going to spend time in the southeast part. This is what they call the panhandle down here. We will be on a small ship that holds about 80 to 90 people. And then we'll go up into Denali. A few slides from that earlier trip in Fairbanks, and then we'll come down on this peninsula, the Kenai, south of Anchorage, so that you can see my wife and I have a tremendous expanse of Alaska that we have to go back up and see sometime. Now, if you remember, I said at that lighthouse, that was the last picture on the ferry going from Prince Rupert to Ketchikan. That was the last picture in Canada. This picture is the first one as we get to Alaska. That little flag there splits this rock, and this side is Canada, and this side is Alaska. And first we're going up, well, some fishing camps, but we're making our way up to Ketchikan. This is the town of Ketchikan. It used to be the third largest city, but Juneau may have overtaken it by now. I'm just not positive. A lot of fishing goes on out of Ketchikan. Now, if you had your own car here, you could probably ride on maybe as much as 35 miles of paved road around, but that's as far as you could go. And then you'd have to put your car on the Alaska Ferry to go any further. This is Creek Street here. This was sort of an infamous street, and we're going to look at that building there in a moment. Tell you a few things about it. But coming up here, this is the start of where the salmon have to practically stand on their tails and get up these cascades to spawn. I think, I'm not sure, but I think this is the edge of one of the salmon here. It's right smack up against that rock. And that is a museum. Only in Alaska would you have a museum of this nature. This is Dolly's house. And Dolly was a madam. And this is Dolly's bedroom. But in Ketchikan, you have things like totem poles. Now, these totems have been brought inside. If a totem up there outside lasts 100 years, that's an ancient one. There's so much moisture and rotting goes forward there. But outside of the little town of Ketchikan, they have a totem park, and we'll see another one at Wrangell as well. But here's the totem park, and I didn't know that lady, but I would guess she was about 5.5 feet high, to give you an idea of the height of this. Pretty flowers, lots of pretty flowers at the time of year. Both of our trips have been in August, and so the flowers are in full swing at that time. We're going now, we're on the ship. You won't actually see the ship until we get to Sitka, but we're on our way down to Misty Fjords National Monument. And this animal that looks exactly the colors of a killer whale is actually a doll porpoise. And there were about 5 of them playing tag with the bow of the ship, just having a great old time on a Sunday afternoon. And we're making our way, this is through the Beam Canal. And the canal, the use of the word canal is very misleading because these are fjords created by glaciers. And I hope you can see the 2 bald eagles up in that tree. And Misty Fjords National Monument is again in the National Park Service, and so we own it. We aren't quite there yet. We have to pass this new Eddystone rock. That rock stands 237 feet out of the water. And we'll be going into this area, which is Punchbowl Cove, 3,000-foot cliffs that you're seeing right ahead. And we're moved now into Rugged Bay. This is all carved by glaciers. And if you look at that little passageway, it'll be slightly dark, but it'll give you an idea of the sizes that we were able to go into with this small ship that we were on. As a matter of fact, the captain, who was a young fella, wanted to show us how good the ship was. See, he has bow thrusters on this. He can actually move the bow without using the rudder by thrusting with air through them. And he is going to take the bow right in between those 2 waterfalls. And 2 people from the galley will come, and one will get a pitcher of water from one waterfall and one from the other. I didn't drink any of it. I don't drink water in the wild anymore. I used to just put my face down in a stream and drink, but no more. Then the captain comes on the PA system as we're leaving Misty Fjords, and he says, "Will anybody be disturbed if I get you up about 10 minutes of 6 in the morning?" And he says, "We will be in Clarence Strait, and that will be our first chance to see humpback whales." And he says, "If I don't see any, I won't call you, but would you mind?" So what you're seeing here is humpback whales. This is a mother, and this is a young. The mother will weigh about 30 to 35 tons, and that little one is just a young one. It'll only weigh about 12 tons by now. And you're looking right into the blowhole of the mother, right here. This is her. Now, when she goes down, she can stay down for about 25 minutes, and then she has to come back up and blow out her lungs, all the water and waste in her lungs, and take in fresh air, because she is an air-breathing mammal. And that is what is known as the fluke, the tail. And usually when it's in that position, the animal is diving. We're making our way towards Wrangell now, and you'll see two versions of Wrangell, one from 1986, which is this one, and another one from 1977, which is that one, which is actually, we were a little clearer that day. That day we were on a larger ship, and the Can-Can girls from the high school came out to greet us. The last time we were on this little ship with only 82 passengers, I think, and nobody greeted us. We just tied up and went ashore. There's the marina there, and you see kids around town selling rough garnets. They'll have a little table set up, and a lady left garnet ledges to the Boy Scouts and to the kids of the town for spending money. They're not gem quality, but they're not bad, and no commercial development of garnet ledges. Outside of Wrangell, well, I can't say outside of it, maybe in Wrangell, is a totem island, and that's one of the old ceremonial buildings, you know, a reproduction of it. But these totems are not real old or anything, but it does illustrate what the totems are like. Back out again, and we're heading up towards Sitka. But we'll be in Frederick Sound first. A few more bald eagles. I did have one fly right across the ship. Here's clear cutting of timber. I'm in the Sierra Club, and I'm just not sure about clear cutting timber. They say, well, if we leave anything up, the wind blows it down anyhow. Well, when you cut as thorough as they do, I suppose that's true. But I like all the islands of the inside passage along through here. It's quite neat. And here's another humpback just ready to dive. And now it's brought its tail up and is dropping down. And then this picture of a diving humpback whale, the fluke of it, was taken at about 11:30 at night with the goal on the water. Not much darkness at all. We've come into Sitka now. Sitka is an old Russian town. It's a National Historic Park thing. Not a national park, National Historic Park. Here are some of the float planes that you need to get around, because again, Sitka is accessible only by water and air. This is the old miners' home, and that statue is to the old miners. Again, the National Park Service has at this park that I mentioned some totems, and then they will have people inside, native people, that will be doing a certain craft that they don't want to lose track of on a particular day, and it varies. And then you can go out into the temperate zone rainforest also. Temperate zone rainforest is along here, get about 160 inches of rain a year. So everything looks nice and lush green. Now we have crossed over on that bridge on a bus, and that is our ship. You'll see it a little closer when we get into Glacier Bay, but it is an explorer type craft. That one is called the Great Rivers Explorer. And then on the way to go over and see the new Archangel dances, we passed this, and I thought it was worth a shot. The Archangel dances, I really can't show you. They don't like you to take flash pictures. I don't take flash anyhow, but everything was fairly dark. But the Archangel dances, they wanted men and women, and no men would join the party. So ladies acted out the men and the women's role, and now that it is just a terrific success, they will not let any men join the group, which I thought was sort of neat. Then over here is the St. Michael's Cathedral, and I mentioned an old Russian town, and that it is, St. Michael's Cathedral. And my wife is up on Castle Hill, and you see a few cannons here because there were some fights here. But look behind her at all the little islands out there. All kinds of neat little islands. And we're looking back at the old St. Michael's Cathedral now, and there's another church in the background. Lighthouses, all kinds of rocky outcroppings, markers for the channel and everything else. And back on Castle Hill. Dahlias. And that little passageway is not overly big, but our ship could go right through it. See, we were small enough so we didn't have to worry about tides, and a lot of these little passageways we could go through. And this one has taken us into Peril Straits. And we'll go right up through Peril Straits heading for Glacier Bay National Park. And this is where the bald eagle finally flew across the ship, and I was able to take his picture. It's the American bald eagle. Now when we get up into Glacier Bay, and Glacier Bay is now a national park, and you will enter it through here. When Captain Cook sailed these waters 200 years ago, the ice was right to here, and there was no such thing as Glacier Bay. John Muir, the great naturalist and one of the founders of the Sierra Club, when he came in 100 years after that, the ice was back up to here. I don't have a marker for this channel, but I think it probably was about here where the L is in Glacier. Now we will be going up this way, and we will go in here to the John Hopkins Glacier. And when we get ashore along the Lampoon Glacier, that will be right in here. At the very end of the show, I'll show you from the air this view. And right in here, the water is about 1,200 feet deep. So these glaciers go down quite a ways. Now we're going in, we're going to look at South Marble Island first, early in the morning to see the birds. You won't see them too close. This is the Fairweather Range over here with all the snow on it. But the captain had called ahead to see if there were any puffins on South Marble Island, and they said they were if you got there early enough. These are all gulls, and frankly, you aren't going to see these too good. But here's a puffin right up in here, and these other guys are gulls. But don't expect miracles here. These little guys are guillemots. This one is in the air with his orange feet, and there's some here. That little fella can dive to about 400 feet. They've been found that far down. Looking out across Marble Island. And then this, I think, is a sort of interesting picture. That is a bald eagle. And these birds do not like bald eagles, and they rose as one and chased him off. He might be king of the birds to others, but he's not king of the birds to them, and they don't want him around their nest. even where they're eating, as a matter of fact. And now we're going to move on into Glacial Bay. Not too great a picture. 4 little puffins down in the water there. Going on into Glacier Bay now. About the only way you can really see Glacier Bay is by ship or by plane. You can see as we get in that there's not much room for hiking. And that crab, that's a Dungeness crab. The people up in Alaska say, oh, we don't eat that Alaskan king crab, that's too coarse. We eat the Dungeness. So this particular one served 2 of us that night. And it is good. Here's a glacier coming down and then dropping off. It's not considered a tidewater glacier because it is not dropping off yet into the salt water of Glacier Bay. But there you can see the wall of ice that is the glacier. Little clouds in front of the mountains and all kinds of neat things. Now, if you've ever heard of a glacial horn, and you can see one up in Glacier National Park in Montana, but a glacial horn is a mountain that has survived glaciers on all sides of it. And this is one in the process of being formed. If it stands, the glaciers on all sides of it and lasts. Then it will have sort of deep valleys on all sides of it, and it will stand alone. We're moving right on up into Glacier Bay now. Now here is a tidewater glacier. Remember that we are in a ship, a small one, true, but we're in a ship in salt water, and these glaciers of fresh ice are coming and calving icebergs and dropping ice floes down as they come. This is the Reed Glacier. And when you see that blue ice, that usually means that it's usually fairly old ice, but it really means that it's compressed, very tightly compressed. We've come to the Lamplugh Glacier now, and they're going to put a gangplank out from the bow, and their people have already gone over the gangplank from our ship and are going up to the glacier. And there's the gangplank over from the ship. Notice the clothing they're wearing. It's a little chilly up here. It's probably in the high 30s into the 40s maybe, but if there's any wind at all, it really gets to you. But you walk right smack up to the side of a glacier. That's my wife and I, and our cabin, I think, was that one down there. And this was the Great Rivers Explorer. Sort of a neat way to see a glacier, to go right smack up alongside of it. Actually, up in the Canadian Rockies, you can walk right up to the toe of a glacier there too. It's not as big as this one, but and then we were heading up into that Grand Pacific Glacier right up coming out of the Yukon. And whoever was at the wheel says, hey, I think we can get into the Hopkins Glacier today. Forget the other one, we're going in. So he changed the plans right then and there, and we went into the Hopkins Glacier. That's it all the way in the background there. And there's another glacier coming down here. Now, you're going to see a few more dark pictures as we go in here because there were a lot of seals in here. There's a few on the ice there, and they're not dark, but they're not close either. I suppose you can see those couple in the middle lying on an ice floe, but we'll move on into a few others. There's a couple more. And then we're right up to the glacier. Now, you're not allowed to go more than a quarter of a mile. You have to stay a quarter of a mile from the glacier because ice ledges can break loose below, and with the rush to the surface can capsize a pretty good sized ship. So you're not allowed in there. But this is the face, and there is an iceberg being calved where you see the rock or the ice falling down. That whole chunk will fall off. And if that one floats to sea, it will be considered an iceberg. Notice the birds flying right in front of it. That's a 200-foot wall of ice that you're looking at, right smack at it. Now these streaks that are across the face of the glacier here, these are probably volcanic ash from several hundred years ago. They could be. I have no way of knowing, but it's not unusual for a volcano to drop ash and then it get trapped in the ice, and then years and years later it emerges at the foot. Also on Glacier Bay, back inland a bit, is a temperate zone rainforest. And I mentioned about 160 inches of rain. We're making our way now up towards Skagway, and this is the town of Skagway. The gold was discovered in Juneau in 1880, in 1898 at Nome, in 1902 at Fairbanks, but in Skagway, the place was to go up into the Yukon Territory, which is in Canada. But this was sort of what you and I would call a staging area. And this little town in 1897 to 98 went from one cabin to 15 to 20,000 people in just 3 months. Incredible. I had something that I wanted to read you from The Spell of the Yukon by Robert Service, since we're in gold country now. I wanted the gold and I got it. Came out with a fortune last fall. Yet somehow life's not what I thought it, and somehow the gold isn't all. No, there's the land. Have you seen it? It's a cussedest land that I know, from the big, dizzy mountains that screen it to the deep, death-like valleys below. Some say God was tired when he made it. Some say it's a fine land to shun. Maybe, but there's some as was traded for no land on earth, and I'm one. This is the oldest building in Skagway. Beautiful flowers. My wife and I are walking out by the airport. Not too much of an airport there, but you can land the small planes. This plant you see is fireweed. It comes in very fast after fires and after other things as well. And this one is called the Lynn Canal, but again, it's a field, and we will shortly be going back down it. And that is the little narrow gauge railroad. You can now take it again, I understand, to get over to Whitehorse in the Yukon. This is more or less the route that the miners went when they were going over the White Pass to get into Bennett Lake, and they could build rafts at Bennett Lake and float up into the Yukon. A rather treacherous float, but they could do it. Now I put this picture in because I wanted to, in a sense, commemorate the death of an awful lot of pack animals. This was the trail going up to Bennett Lake. And the miners, they went on their own. The poor pack animals that they used, and many of them died along here, they didn't have a whole lot of choice in it. But that tiny little trail that you were looking at was the pathway of thousands of gold seekers for the Yukon gold. Now we're going back down, we're back on our ship, and we're going down the Lynn Canal. And remember, that's a field, not a canal. And you're going to see some beautiful waterfalls as we go along here. And we're heading for a town called Haines, Alaska. And that's Haines across the river there. And back in from Haines, coming through there and coming this way is a river, the Chilkat River. And they say that in November, if you go up there and the salmon are running, that you can see about 2,000 bald eagles fishing for salmon along there. It's called the counseling ground of the eagles. But we were after salmon, but we were getting it a slightly different way. We were going to have our only meal off of the ship in 7 days, and it was charcoal roasted salmon, and it was delicious. And while we were eating it, we saw the Chilkat dances. Now this, the dances will not come quite into focus. This is just handheld, available light type of thing. But the Chilkat dances and the routines that they do were being lost. And the man there with the patch over his eye was afraid they would be lost forever. So he took it upon himself to hold on to this tradition, and he lined up people and so forth. And the man is from Cleveland. I never did find out what his name was, but we ate some of the finest salmon while we were watching that we had on the entire trip. Then our next stop was Juneau, and this is the old Davis log cabin which stretches way back. Now way back in Alaska isn't all that far as buildings are concerned. Every place in Juneau seemed to be uphill. Even when we were going back down to the ship, it seemed like we had to go uphill. But anyhow, this is the old St. Nicholas Russian Orthodox Church. This one goes back to 1894. Now, in the 48 states, especially up in New England along the eastern seaboard, that wouldn't be considered old, but it is considered old there. Now, the state capitol is there, and then we found out there was another totem over by the governor's mansion. This is the governor's mansion, and here's the totem that stands right alongside of it. They like their totem poles up through here. And then, especially if you've been on a big ship and have not been able to see any bald eagles or the nest of bald eagles or any of that stuff, you should really go into this museum here in Juneau, because they have a two-story part of it that is used to illustrate with actual nests and actual birds the nesting and what the birds look like and so forth. So it is well worth going to. I hate to think that they killed the birds to do it, but it is there and it is worth it. And then this poor man, William Seward, he was called a nut for actually buying Alaska. It wasn't worth it. It was called Seward's Folly. But From Russia in 1864, Alaska was purchased for $7.2 million. That's less than 2 cents an acre. Before the turn of the century, I think they'd already taken something like $2 billion in gold out of the place. It was the 49th state in 1959 when Eisenhower was president. And back behind this conference center and up on the heights there is the Mendenhall Glacier, and we'll see that. I have never been up to it, but I have a picture of it from the air. But we will be going from Juneau, and we'll be going up into Tracy Arm. This is I was told it was a pedestrian mall, but somehow or other it had vehicles in it. And then down by the ship, the beautiful flowers right on the dock. And our tour director, our historian and everything else, boy, that guy really had the information. He left the ship at 2 o'clock the night before to go fishing, and he got this halibut. I asked him to put his hand down, and he says, "I just washed my hand, I'll put my foot." So you are having his foot to compare. And now we have left. In a place like Juneau, and quite a few of these ports, if the tour ship is one of the big ones, like a 2,000 passenger one, maybe the Sun Princess or something like that, they have to anchor off of the docks and ferry everybody in by launches. But we could tie up most any place. We're going into Tracy Arm now. An arm means an arm of the sea. And this is all salt water, you understand. And we're going in to see the Sawyer Glacier. These are ice flows. And when those ice flows, they don't mind, this is a double-hull ship, they don't mind touching ice flows. But if they are dark blue, they will not touch them, because they could rupture the ship. We're going in on that one. There's that hole. So much nice fresh water. Now that's the kind that they will not, they will skirt around. They will be sure that they will not touch that. That is very concentrated ice. And this is the Sawyer Glacier. The Sawyer Glacier is about 1.25 miles across. And when I talk about 200 feet of ice, I'm just talking about from about there down. And then it goes down quite a ways. And of course, the ice goes on back for miles. Now that's sealed, you should be able to see. And that one. Now it's calving an iceberg here. This is on the ship, but it's calving an iceberg back there. And the captain said, came on the public address system, and he said, "Grab onto something. We may get a wave out of this." We did get a wave, but it wasn't too big. And then we're making our way on to Petersburg. Petersburg was settled by mostly Norwegian people, and we'll be stopping there. They do a lot of salmon canning at Petersburg. Notice the mountains in the background with the snow all over them. And that's the Sons of Norway Hall, and we're going to go there and see some more dances, some rose malling, and get a little dessert. These are the dances. And again, they wanted men in the group, and none of them would volunteer. So all the ladies and girls took all of the parts, and so they won't let anybody in now. This is called rose mauling. This was sort of a craft type thing, a method of decorating that was brought over from the old country. Now we're going up into the LeConte Glacier, and this will be the last tidewater glacier on the ship's tour. And that's the LeConte Glacier. I think that one's about a mile across. And that's something you don't want to touch, not even with a canoe. You just don't want to touch it. It's too hard. Nice flutes. There's another piece of that blue ice right at the toe of the glacier. Those are all seals laying over there. Now, as we end our ship's tour and go over to another part of Alaska, there's the Alaskan flag with the Big Dipper and the North Star on it. And we're going over, we flew over then from Ketchikan, that's where the ship tour ended, and picked up a van over in Anchorage. And we had taken our sleeping bags across Canada, and so we will be staying in this, this van. We had them pull the back seats, and so we will be staying in it. And we're on our way up to Denali now. There's some churning water along the edges here. That, where the flag is, there's a little camp over in through there. We were making our way on up, and where we had parked and camped that night, or camped in the van, I took this picture about 11 o'clock at night, just south of Denali National Park. And what you do here is you park by the visitor center, and you make a reservation on one of those tour buses. They're just school buses. It doesn't cost you anything, but they go in 85 miles over the dirt road to Wonder Lake, and they ask that you go that way instead of having all of those vehicles going in. And some of the roads, you're sort of glad you aren't using your own vehicle. But these are all rivers that are full when the first of the snow melts late in the spring. While we're on our way in, I have a little more Robert Service. See, Robert Service wrote about the Yukon, but it all applies actually to Alaska as well. See where the car is and the drop-offs down there, no guardrails or anything, so that's sort of neat. But anyhow, this is a little more of Robert Service from Spell of the Yukon. The summer, no sweeter was ever. The sunshiny woods, all a thrill. The grayling, a leap in the river. The bighorn, asleep on the hill. The strong life that never knows harness. The wilds where the caribou call. The freshness, the freedom, the farness. Oh God, how I'm stuck on it all. Now, Denali National Park is larger than New Jersey and Rhode Island combined. It's a big park. You make your way back in there gradually, and you start seeing caribou. Now the caribou and the reindeer are the same animal, same species, same everything. It's just that the reindeer have been domesticated. They're domesticated caribou. But that's the most likely animal for you to see. And this is a grizzly bear. Now, when you're in there, they will stop those buses and they'll let you put all the windows down. You might have them down anyhow, but they will not let anybody off in the presence of wildlife. See that little skim of vegetation on the very top? This is all area that has permafrost. The permafrost is probably at about 13, 14 inches. And so it's just a little bit of ground that can actually grow anything. That's why you don't have trees. The roots of a tree can break up rock because they can get into crevices, but they cannot get into the crevices of ice. There are no crevices there. It melts and then refreezes and it's gone. And this is Wonder Lake. We have come 85 miles out in the shuttle bus. You can get off of those shuttle buses. There's the Eelson Center and so forth, and get on another one or whatever you want to do. Now from here you should be able to see the mountain, but we didn't. But we saw this little guy. This is an Arctic tern, and he is sort of the ultimate migrant. He flies about 25,000 miles a year in his migrating tour down to the tip of South America, the Arctic tern. So I at least got that. And then I bought a commercial slide of Denali, taken more or less out in the Wonder Lake area so you could at least see what the mountain looks like. That's the highest mountain in North America, but it's not my picture. And these are the roadways, the waterways on the way back. Not too much water in them right now, but sometimes it's from bank to bank. Those are caribou laying there. Now the young fellow that was driving the bus was from Fairbanks, and this was his second year for driving, and they were getting very close to the end of the season. And he says in the park, larger than New Jersey, there are about 70 wolves, and he has never seen any of them. On the way back in, we saw two. One you've already seen, and we saw this one. Close enough for me to actually get pictures, not great pictures, but pictures of two wolves in the wild. And then we saw the largest bull moose that my wife and I had ever seen, and we've seen quite a few out in the American West. I had to take 2 pictures of him to get the size of him and then to get his rack on it. But he was a tremendous bull moose. And then later on was when we saw this wolf that you have already seen. So it was a worthwhile venture, even though we didn't see Mount McKinley. Some more of the fireweed and out by the entrance. Neat stuff. Now we're going up to Fairbanks, and this was from the earlier trip in 1977. There's a room in one of those buildings I want to show you, the one dead ahead. But here's a little bit more of the flowers. But there's a place called the Gold Room inside. And I have a little bit more of Robert Service here. There's gold, and it's haunting and haunting. It's luring me on as of old. Yet it isn't the gold that I'm wanting so much as just finding the gold. It's a great big broad land way up yonder. It's a forest where silence has lease. It's the beauty that thrills me with wonder. It's the stillness that fills me with peace. And all of these are nuggets, huge gold nuggets. And that's a musk oxen. These are native around the Arctic Circle. This one is on a farm associated with the University of Alaska. And they're trying to learn how to really protect these and maybe even raise them. because its inner wool, you're seeing the rough hairs of it. The inner wool is called quivet, and quivet has about 8 times the properties of warmth that sheep's wool has. So it's a very valuable animal from that standpoint. Now, I'm not a golfer, but I've been told that this is the northernmost golf course in the world. And it used to be, and I've also been told that since I took this picture, they covered it with the greens with AstroTurf. But at this time, when you got up